Have you ever wondered why some of the writings of the Old Testament portray God in a light that is very different to the God Jesus came to show us in New Testament times? Jesus said, "If you had known me, ye should have known my Father also. And from henceforth ye know him, and have seen him." Philip saith unto him, "Lord, show us the Father, and it sufficeth us." Jesus saith unto him, "Have I been so long time with you, and yet hast thou not known me, Philip? He that has seen me hath seen the Father. And how sayest thou then, Show us the Father?" And that's found in John 14:7-9. Again, in 1 John 4:8, John says, "He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love." Sounds pretty clear. God doesn't just have love, he is love. So why do we find passages in the Bible that seem to contradict this concept of perfect love? Such as Deuteronomy 32 verses 41 and 42. "If I whet my glittering sword, and mine hand take hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to my enemies, and will reward them that hate me. I will make mine arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh, and that with the blood of the slain and the captives, from the beginning of revenges upon the enemy." If God is telling the truth when he says, "For I am the Lord, I change not, therefore ye sons of Jacob are not consumed," Malachi 3:6, how do we reconcile the picture of God that Jesus showed us with the picture of God Moses wrote about in Deuteronomy? I pondered these questions for several years and finally decided to undertake a study that would hopefully answer some of those questions. I decided to start in Genesis and look at every verse with the question, what does this tell me about God? How does this compare with what Jesus showed us of God? And how can this be reconciled with the life of Jesus? Sometimes it's easy to see, but sometimes it's a real challenge. Takes some real digging. I must say, it has been the most blessed study I've ever undertaken, and so I've decided to share some of it with you. I'm not a theologian, nor a biblical linguist, and the only tools I've used are prayer, the Bible, the Blue Letter Bible website or app, and that was mostly to gain information about the original languages through their interlinear feature, and also to search for other texts to compare to, etc. And a text document on my computer. I copied passages of the Bible into the text document and then interspersed my own thoughts and notes in between the different passages as I was reading them. Currently, I've worked my way from Genesis to the end of Deuteronomy, and the picture of God I've found in those passages has just blown my mind. My life has been completely transformed, along with some of my long-held understandings of biblical teachings. Before we start, there are a couple of overarching themes we need to understand. The first one is salvation. The first 2 chapters of Genesis tell us that God created everything perfect. The last 2 chapters of Revelation tell us that God will recreate everything perfect again. Everything else in between is the story of the battle between God and Satan for our hearts and affections, and the lengths that both sides have gone to win us over. The second overarching theme that we need to have a think about is the role of Satan in the Old Testament. The term Satan, which means adversary or one who withstands, is only used 19 times in the entire Old Testament, and 14 of those 19 times are in the book of Job. Conversely, the name Satan appears 37 times in the New Testament, which is only about a quarter of the size of the Old Testament. The word devil is never used in the Old Testament, but is used 61 times in the New Testament. It seems that although Lucifer was cast out of heaven in Isaiah 14:12, around the time of the creation of this planet, he was not entirely excluded from heavenly councils. And you can find that in Job chapter 1. It appears that Lucifer, who turned Satan the withstander, was given a trial run after Adam and Eve handed over their governorship of earth, and was given time to prove his point. There is a picture of God that emerges across the Old Testament, where God often takes responsibility for the disasters caused by Satan, like a loving parent might do for a wayward child, in the hopes that the child will eventually mend their ways. For around 4,000 years this was the case, until Jesus came. By that time, the people's picture of God and Satan was so messed up, Jesus had to come in person to give us the true picture of God, and he spent much of his time working to expose Satan for the enemy and devil he truly had become. When Satan went so far as to brutally torture and murder the very Son of God, it was clear that there was no turning back for him. However, if that had been the end of the story, there would likely have been only one convert, the thief on the cross next to Jesus. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering to usward, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. 2 Peter 3:9. So whose side are you on? Have you seen the God that Jesus came to show us, or do you still see in him aspects of good and evil? If you still have questions, then this series is for you. If you have already given your heart to God, then this series is for you. If you have never heard of the Bible, God, Jesus, or Satan, then this series is definitely for you. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. John 3:16.